Mr. President, I am privileged to address the United Nations General Assembly today. Let me congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election to the presidency of the 68th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I thank the Secretary General for a comprehensive annual report on the work of the organization. It covers a wide spectrum of issues that inform the activities of the United Nations. It also underscores the global and interconnected nature of the challenges we face, as well as highlights the unfinished agenda of development and reform. It is important that the socio-political challenges in the West Asian region are addressed in an inclusive and peaceful manner. Mr. President, with less than 850 days remaining for the fulfillment, we need to accord the highest priority to the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. Substantial progress has been made in reducing poverty, yet our gains and progress has been uneven and short on expectations. Secretary General's report points out that almost 1 billion people will still live in extreme poverty in 2015. Eradication of poverty, therefore, must remain the core overreaching objective of the post-2015 development agenda, including under the SDGs. The quest for sustainability will ring hollow as long as there exist deep imbalances in the consumption of natural resources and carbon-intensive lifestyles in the developed world. The fact will still remain that the richest billion people consume 2/3 of Earth's resources, whereas the bottom billion, a meager 1%. On climate change, India remains fully committed to crafting an ambitious, balanced and comprehensive outcome of negotiations in accordance with the principles and provisions of the UNFCCC. As we embark on the process of framing sustainable development goals, crucial issues such as that of resource mobilization, be it ODA, technology transfer, trade or FDI, must find appropriate priority to be enshrined in the principles of common but differential responsibilities, CBDR and equity. Insofar as our development partnership initiatives go, we are resolved to carry forward and expand our multifaceted and vibrant cooperation with Africa, including through the framework of the India-Africa Forum Summit. Similarly, we will continue to build on our commitments for enhanced cooperation with the least developed countries, the landlocked developing countries, and the small island developing states within the overall rubric of South-South cooperation. Mr. President, terrorism remains a grave threat to security and stability everywhere and extracts a heavy toll of innocent lives around the world. From South Africa to Asia, we have seen several manifestations of this menace. The international community has long acknowledged the ever-present and pervasive threat posed by terrorism. No country, city or region is immune from this global scourge. And yet, regretfully, we have failed ourselves by continuing to procrastinate on concluding the comprehensive convention against international terrorism. It is time that member states summoned the necessary political will to agree to the CCIT as a sound legal framework for the fight against terrorism. We need concerted global action. Such action should be predicated on zero tolerance towards terrorism and aimed at systematically dismantling the infrastructure of terrorism. Mr. President, India has a proud association with United Nations peacekeeping since its very inception. Over 150,000 of our uninformed personnel have participated in this flagship endeavor of the United Nations. As peacekeeping moves forward, we must remain mindful of the challenges of operating in increasingly complex environments. Not only should the mandates be realistic, but their framing should be inclusive of all stakeholders in a meaningful manner. Ambitious mandates require matching resources. We also need to be mindful of peacekeepers' safety while crafting these mandates. It is also imperative that those who threaten and attack United Nations peacekeepers are held accountable. Cases where UN peacekeepers have laid down their lives due to attacks by militias and non-state actors must be thoroughly investigated and perpetrators of such acts brought to justice expeditiously. Mr. President, we note with appreciation the initiatives to modernize and reform the Secretariat, including through large-scale business transformation projects such as the new enterprise resource planning system, UMOJA, International Public Sector Accounting Standards, IPSAS, managed mobility of Secretariat staff, and the Capital Master Plan. While each involves considerable investment, we see them as important drivers in modernizing the UN. However, it is our deep-rooted conviction that the relevance of the United Nations ultimately hinges on more fundamental reform of its governance, architecture that is frozen in another era that perpetuates the rights of the haves of the mid-1940s. It is only through such governance reform that the UN can truly invigorate action on issues of pressing global concern, be it issues of peace and security, climate change, development, or human rights. Let me therefore conclude, Mr. President, by raising something that inexplicably does not find even mention in the Secretary General's report. That is the important issue of Security Council reform, where intergovernmental negotiations have not seen much progress in spite of a clear affirmation by an overwhelming majority of the member states for expansion in both the permanent and non-permanent categories. We need to build on this by immediately commencing real negotiations based on a negotiation text, as is the case in all UN processes. It is imperative that this process is imparted a sense of urgency and momentum by pressing for a result-based timeline to achieve early reforms of the Security Council. The year 2015, which would be the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, as well as 10 years following the Millennium Summit Declaration, in which our heads of state and government mandated us to achieve early reforms of the Security Council, will be an important occasion, therefore, to deliver some concrete results and an expanded Security Council reflecting contemporary realities. I thank you, Mr. President.